Listen, NBA GMs and specifically the Los Angeles Clippers, don't overcomplicate this. Keaton Wagler is him.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank y'all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Sports Network the number one sports network in the world. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. My name is Sonny Verma, your host here at Locked On, where, of course, you get daily coverage of the beloved. So if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and make sure you like this episode. And what's this episode today about? It's about the NBA draft, which is going to be held on Tuesday evening, and supposedly this big conundrum that the Los Angeles Clippers are dealing with. And, you know, I guess you can say this goes for all the teams from drafting from number 5 to number 9, about this glut of guards and who gets picked where between Keaton Wagler, Darius Acuff, Brown, and then you have Kingston Flemings. And to me, you know, I saw a tweet last week. It was Sam Vecini tweeting about how Keaton Wagler had gained 100, or Keaton Wagler had entered Champaign at 168 pounds. And at the NBA draft combine, he was at 188 pounds. And it shows you in one season, he gained 20 pounds. And a lot of people didn't believe it. But it kind of perfectly explains something that I just think that the casual fan is ignoring about Keaton. And that genuinely, he might have had the single most impressive one-year development in all of college basketball last year. Now, I don't think the newer people who are learning about Keaton Wagler fully understand and appreciate that. Just take a look at where this story started. Keaton was certainly no Cooper Flagg. He wasn't some 5-star that everyone predicted would come in to be an NBA lottery pick. He was a player that many high major programs weren't even interested in. And then he gets to Illinois, and 1 year later, he's the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, potentially a top 5 pick. And that kind of rise, you simply do not see that kind of rise in today's age. In the modern day era, like, players are evaluated once they're in 7th grade, 8th grade. Everyone's got phones. Everyone has information at their fingertips. And yet somehow Keaton Wagler became an unknown and out of nowhere. And when you hear, you know, going from 168 pounds to 188 pounds, some of those pieces start fitting together. Because here's the thing. You know, sure, a lot of freshmen do arrive onto campus in pretty decent shape and close to physically, but a lot of freshmen do grow in their freshman season. You know, they're able to add some strength. But the thing with Keaton is Keaton got to train and get stronger and better under the best college basketball strength coach in the world. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. You are wrong. But Adam Fletcher is the best strength and conditioning coach in all of college basketball. Think about where Keaton came from. A little town in Kansas where, quite honestly, if you look at the footage of him playing in high school basketball, you can see that it's not exactly a huge high school or a huge town. And you can tell that maybe some of the luxuries that all of a sudden he found in Champaign, he wasn't getting where he was playing in high school. I mean, a lot of the bigger programs in high school, a lot of these players are basically, they've got the most efficient diets, the most efficient workouts, et cetera, et cetera. Keaton never really got that. But when you put him in an environment where he was being treated essentially as a professional, and he got professional training and professional diet, you saw him gain 20 pounds. And again, the funny thing is, even when you look at his tape now, he still looks skinny, right? When you watch him, he still looks like he has more weight to gain. And I fully believe that he does. He's got the frame to gain some more weight. He's not a finished product yet. And when this kid is still developing, and when he goes from college basketball straight to the NBA, and he gets to basically make it his profession, there's no classes to worry about. It's strictly all day, 24/7, working with strength and conditioning, eating the right foods, and just playing basketball. Well, I think that's where Keaton blossoms. Okay, last year he comes in as a 168-pound freshman. He gains 20 pounds, and what does he do? Well, he averages nearly 18 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He has an All-American season, a Final Four run, 46 points against Purdue. I'm never not going to mention that in any episode I can. He had not just one of the greatest freshman seasons that an Illinois basketball player has ever had, but he's had arguably the best season an Illinois basketball player has ever had. And again, all of that while still being physically immature. And that's where the upside discussion begins. If you're an LA Clippers fan, if you are a fan of any of the teams right after them, Keaton Wagler is not a player you need to debate. Keaton Wagler, I understand, is probably a name that you weren't paying much attention to until your team got that top 10 pick. But trust us, Illini fans who've been watching him from the day he stepped foot on campus to that final loss in the Final Four to UConn. The NBA player doesn't draft players on what they are. You draft players on what they can become. And when you hear 168 pounds to 188 pounds, trust me, in a year and a half, that can be 215 pounds. And his frame, as I said, can handle it. But more importantly, his game is built around it. He may be skinny, but if you watch his highlights, if you watched him play, he was not shying away from contact. He loved attacking the rim. He plays like a player he plays like a physical player, even though his body didn't quite follow up with it. So imagine if he does gain another 20 pounds. He gets to 210, and you still have the same feel, the same passing, the same high basketball IQ, and the same competitive fire that Keaton Wagler showed. But on top of that, you got another 25 pounds of muscle. Now, defenders can't bump him off of spots, or he's able to finish through contact. It becomes easier for him, and he's able to absorb the physicality instead of just simply surviving it. Well, now Keaton Wagler becomes a potential two-way force. And I think that's why a lot of these teams are just overthinking this, especially if you're an LA Clippers. The Clippers are fascinating because they're kind of stuck between two timelines, right? They still have Kawhi Leonard. They still want to compete. They're not waving the white flag, but everyone also understands the reality. Kawhi Leonard is not 26 years old anymore. And the current version of the Clippers, well, they have a certain timeline of where they can actually consider themselves contenders. At some point, they're going to need to acknowledge the next era, and they're going to have to build foundational pieces for it. And sometimes you just need a guy who can help bridge the gap between competing now and building for later. And for me, that's why the answer is clear. The answer is Keaton Wagler, because what makes him such an attractive prospect is that he works in both timelines. If you're trying to win games right now, Keaton Wagler helps. He's smart. He's skilled. He moves without the ball. He can shoot. He can pass. He understands how to play. If Kawhi Leonard is still the guy, let Kawhi Leonard still be the guy. And Keaton can adapt his game around it. He understands how to play. Veteran teams should love that. He can fit aside established veterans immediately. But if things go sideways, if the Clippers realize sooner rather than later that they're going to need to reset, well, then if the roster changes dramatically, it doesn't matter. Keaton still works because essentially you're building around a 6'6" playmaking guard with an elite shooting touch, high level feel, and a body that's still developing. Those are incredibly valuable in the modern day NBA game. In fact, it's arguably the most valuable archetype in the entire league. Every team wants size. Every team wants shooting. Every team wants versatility. And on top of that, you get high basketball IQ. Keaton checks every single one of those boxes. And unlike some of the other prospects, again, he's not really close to his physical ceiling yet. And he's not a player who needs the ball. He's, again, maybe that's what's kind of jumping out at me. This isn't a player who dominated because he's bigger and stronger than everybody else in college basketball. This is a player who dominated despite still being physically underdeveloped. And how often do you say that about a potential top 5 pick? Usually lottery picks tend to look the part. They have those NBA bodies. Keaton's body is still catching up to his talent. And that's why this upside argument is so compelling, because the best version of Keaton Wagler might not arrive for another 2-3 seasons. And that's when you're going to see an All-American finally enter his final form. And that's just absurd. And that's why this draft process is going to be fascinating. Some teams are going to look at his production. Some teams are going to look at his measurements. Some teams are going to look at his shooting numbers. But the smartest teams are probably looking at something bigger. They can look at his trajectory from where he started to how quickly he's improved, and looking at physically how much weight he's able to already gain and how much he can continue to add. And they just need to ask a simple question. If this kid improved this much in 1 year, both on the court and off the court, what happens over the next 4 years? And that's the question that could make somebody very rich. And that's why if I'm a sitting NBA front office and Keaton Wagler is available when my pick comes up, I'm not overthinking it. I'm taking the guy who went from 168 to 188 to an All-American. I'm taking the guy who became the best player on a Final Four team. I'm taking the guy whose story might be the best developmental story in all of basketball last year. And I'm betting that the best version of Keaton Wagler is still ahead of us. You let me know your thoughts. If you're not an Illini fan, you just happen to stumble across this episode, what are your thoughts on Keaton? I think it's a no-brainer at 5. Stop it. Keaton Wagler, if you're the LA Clippers, take him. Obviously, when he does end up getting drafted on Tuesday evening, we'll have a recap of who picked him and what the fit looks like. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I read each and every one. Workplace chaos can show up fast. That's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. As I said in that first segment, it should not be hard if you're in an organization that moves in the most efficient process. If you're working together, make sure you draft Keaton Wagler. He's the best of best candidates. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And welcome back. Exciting times if you're an NBA fan, exciting times if you're an Illini basketball fan, and right now it's kind of exciting times if you are an Illini football fan. Let's talk a little bit about a new commitment that Illinois football was able to get. Usually when you see a position coach start stacking wins, it's a sign that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. And I feel like that's exactly what just happened with Brody Knowles, who committed to the Illini on Monday. Illinois landed the commitment out of the talented wide receiver out of Texas. But again, I don't know if this is just a story about Brody Knowles at this point, and more so a story about Justin Stepp. Just last week, he landed Bennett Conkey, and this week, Illinois lands Brady Knowles. Oh, there's no way I'm not going to mess those two names up at some point in the near future. I'm going to swap it out. Oh, it's going to be bad. Anyways, when you zoom out and you take a look at the bigger picture, you start to realize that Justin Stepp has quietly become one of the more important recruiters on Brett Bielema's staff. A few years ago, wide receiver was one of the biggest concerns on the roster. And today, it's arguably the deepest and healthiest position group on the entire program. And it's not by accident. The latest piece now is Brody Knowles. Let's start with the player. I've got him up on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're one of my dear friends on audio platforms, I'll explain the best I can. He's about 6'5", 190 pounds, out of South Lake, Texas. If you followed recruiting long enough, you know that whenever a staff goes to Texas and wins a recruiting battle, your ears should perk up because Texas produces more high-level football talent than almost anywhere in America. There are Power 4 programs all over the country recruiting that state every single year. So when Illinois identifies a player down there and they're able to build a relationship, get them on campus, and ultimately land that commitment, it really is a victory, especially at wide receiver. And again, what stands out about Knowles isn't that he's necessarily the flashiest prospect who wins every drill with pure athleticism. It's just he seems different, right? He seems very polished and refined, the kind of receiver that coaches tend to love because he already understands how to play the position. When you watch his film, the first thing that's going to jump out at you is how comfortable he looks running routes. A lot of high school receivers are simply just better athletes than the kids covering them. You know, they can just run past defenders or out jump cornerbacks. They can win purely because they're more physically gifted. But college football changes that equation because everybody is athletic. Everybody was the best player on their high school team. What separates players at the next level is often technique. And that's where I think Brody Knowles becomes really interesting because he seems to understand route spacing, leverage, and how to create separation and how to attack zone coverage. And that are the advanced traits. That's very advanced for being a high school wide receiver. One of the things the evaluators that I was reading on when I was trying to get some background on Brody was that they consistently mention his ability to vary his tempo. And that may sound simple, but it's incredibly important. Keep in mind, the best wide receivers don't run every route at the same speed. They know when to accelerate. They know when to throttle down. They know how to sell one route before breaking into another. And Knowles already shows a lot of those traits. And that's why I think he's the kind of prospect who could eventually outperform whatever recruiting ranking gets attached to him. Because some of the most successful college receivers aren't always the fastest guys. They're the guys who just understand how to get open. And Brody Knowles looks like a player who understands how to get open. Another thing I really seem to like about reading about his game is his reliability. Illinois has recruited plenty of explosive athletes over the years, but every offense needs players quarterbacks can simply trust. And players who can just catch the ball, know where they're supposed to be, catch or at least convert on third downs. Well, Knowles has that kind of vibe to me. He catches the ball naturally away from his body. He tracks the football well. He can show body control, and he seems to be comfortable making contested catch. Well, that's a very valuable skill, in particular in the Big Ten, because not every completion is going to come with 5 yards of separation. Sometimes you're going to have to win ugly, and Knowles looks like the kind of player who will embrace that challenge. Also, keep in mind, Illinois isn't recruiting him strictly as an outside wide receiver. They're not recruiting him strictly as an inside wide receiver. They're recruiting him as a football player, a guy who can move around the formation, who can create matchup problems, who can do multiple things. And if you've watched college football, at least where it's gone over the past decade, versatility, again, it's that magic word, has become one of the most valuable traits a wide receiver can possess. Offensive coordinators want flexibility. They want to be able to create flexible matchups. They want receivers who can line up in different spots and stress defenses out in different ways. And I think Brody Knowles is going to give Illinois that option. Another thing that should earn him early trust is his willingness to block. And I know that's not going to show up on any of the highlight reels that you're going to watch. Nobody makes a recruiting graphic for a great crack block. But if you watched Bret Bielema football, you know how important that is. Illinois asks its wide receivers to block. They want physicality from the perimeter. They want complete football players. And Knowles consistently shows effort in that area. And that's something the coaches noticed. And that's something that the veterans will notice. And it often helps the younger players get on the field faster. Now let's talk a little bit about why this commitment matters beyond just the player. Again, I just want to bring up Justin Stepp. A week ago, we're celebrating Bennett Conkey. Now we're celebrating Brody Knowles. And suddenly you're looking at a wide receiver room that continues to add talent, continues to add depth, and continues to recruit at a really high level. Think about where Illinois was when Bret Bielema first arrived. Receiver was a major question mark. The room lacked depth. There really weren't any difference makers, and there wasn't enough competition. Fast forward today, and the position looks completely different. There's a lot of development happening. There's a lot of evaluation, and honestly, a lot of that is recruiting. And Justin Stepp deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Stepp has done a fantastic job identifying players that fit what Illinois wants to be offensively. Not just athletes. He's not just focused on stars. Justin Stepp is looking for fit, and that's an important distinction because recruiting isn't about collecting talent. It's about collecting the right talent. Brody Knowles feels like a Justin Stepp receiver. He's reliable, he's versatile, and he's polished. A player who understands the details of the position. Those are the kind of players that can help you flip a football game. And perhaps, as I mentioned, the most encouraging thing is that he's from Texas, because this is another reminder that Illinois recruiting is no longer confined to Illinois or Missouri or Indiana or Wisconsin. Brett Bielema's staff is recruiting nationally. Archie McDaniel has opened the doors in Texas on defense. Justin Stepp is opening doors in Texas on offense. And every time Illinois lands a player from a talent-rich state like the Lone Star State, well, it strengthens the program's credibility in that region. And that's how recruiting footprints grow, one commitment at a time. So when I look at Brody Knowles, I see a good prospect. I see a polished wide receiver, a player whose game should translate well to the college football level. But I also see something potentially bigger. Another example of Illinois building a sustainable recruiting operation. Another sign of Justin Stepp winning. And I see another example of Brett Bielema's staff continuing to expand its reach beyond the Midwest. Last week it was Bennett Conkey. This week it's Brody Knowles. And if Illinois continues to stack commitments like these, the future of the wide receivers room is going to be in very good hands. Because while Brody Knowles may not arrive with the biggest headlines in the country, he's exactly the kind of player who becomes a fan favorite a few years down the road. And thanks to Justin Stepp and this coaching staff, he's going to be doing it in the orange and blue. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other? That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. Just go back to Justin Stepp. As I spoke, things didn't work out in Clemson when he was let go of there. Clemson fans were celebrating. Now at Illinois, it looks like him, Barry Lundy Jr. and Brett Bielema really do seem to be in sync, and they seem to be very coordinated, and there's a coordinated effort across the entire program that has made it successful. Just remember, great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. And welcome back. If you hadn't already, make sure you hit the like button on this particular video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Again, it's my goal to get this channel to 5,000 subs on YouTube by the time we kick off for the football season, and I think we can do it. Trust me, you may not realize it. You may be watching this each and every day because I show up on your feed and you're not subscribed. Please, if you don't mind, go double check. It's right down below. You would really be helping me out. And also hit the like button, not just for this video, but the news that just broke while I was recording it. Dusty May, the Michigan head coach, who they obviously just won the national championship, was just announced that he's going to the Dallas Mavericks of the NBA. Amazing. That's great news for Illini fans. It's something I'll probably deep dive into a little bit further on this week on what this kind of means for the Illinois expectations. But some of you I know get this may not be paying all that much attention. And depending on when I release this episode, this might be the first you hear about it. Dusty May is leaving Michigan. And so all of a sudden, you're talking about the two strongest contenders in the Big Ten this upcoming season were supposed to be Michigan and Illinois. Most people had Michigan at number one, but now when you lose three potential lottery picks and your head coach, I imagine that Illinois' expectations have gotten that much higher. Again, this is something I'll deep dive a little bit more into, but let's just be honest. This is great news for Illinois. This is great news for the Big Ten Conference, and this is great news for college basketball in general. Dusty May, arguably the best coach in the Big Ten Conference for what he's done in the last 2 years. Okay, maybe that's a little drastic. Might be a little hyperbole there when you talk about Matt Painter and Tom Izzo and what they've kind of done. But again, he was a problem. I think that's fair to say. And so that, Michigan, I know they've reloaded in the transfer portal and they've got some exciting freshmen coming in, but it's going to be very interesting for us as Illini fans to kind of just see what their next move is, who they go after, and what kind of names are getting brought up. Because obviously this is so late in the cycle, right? Like, can they go for a big name, or do they just hire maybe a guy on the assistant coaching staff now and maybe just give him a promotion and an interim label? It's hard, man. Maybe you go after a guy like Billy Donovan. But, another thing to keep in mind about is, well, a lot of these players are now going to be eligible to enter the transfer portal. Does anybody leave? I'm not sure. Dusty, he's got a reputation about how he recruits his players, and we're going to kind of see how that's going to translate to the NBA level. But again, you cannot discount his coaching capabilities, both what he did at FAU and now what he did in 2 seasons at Michigan. The guy can coach. The guy can coach really good basketball. And I think as Illini fans, we're very fortunate that he won't be coaching in the Ann Arbor next year. Now, who that next coach is going to be, all of us need to pay very close attention to, because again, that Michigan team, talent-wise, is almost right there, step by step, with this Illinois team. And so it's going to be a very big and pivotal hire for that program. All right, that's going to just about wrap things up. If you haven't already, also, please consider joining the Talk Illini Discord, where I had to pause recording this show so I can drop the news in there, because we're all kind of talking about it. This was very exciting news, right? Like, whether you're a fan of Michigan or not, if you're just a fan of the Big Ten or Illinois, whatever, arguably one of the best coaches in the country is moving on. And just, again, so incredibly late for the cycle. Dusty May's a guy I wanted the Bulls to hire. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. And I even wrote an article for Roundtable Sports saying that Dusty May should have been the guy for Chicago, and it didn't work out. It looked like Dusty was going to stick around at Michigan, but it looks like maybe not. Maybe the idea of coaching a talent like Cooper Flagg was just too much to pass up. And, when you're at the mountaintop and you've won the national championship, there's really no other place than to go down. And maybe Dusty was just kind of ready for that next challenge. I always got the vibes he was ready for the next challenge, and that's why I did think that maybe coming to Chicago would be an option. But there's never really any substantial rumors that suggested that. So I guess it was just one of those. Maybe he always had his eye on Dallas. Again, for me, with the NBA draft on Tuesday night, does Mara and Yaxel or Morez, are they all of a sudden more open to the idea of going number 9 to Dallas Mavericks now that their head coach has been hired? Is a head coach who knows their games inside and out more open to drafting one of those guys at number 9? I think Keaton Wagler at number 9 would have been the perfect fit, standing next to Cooper Flagg. Regardless, all right, we'll talk about that, and in particular how Illinois benefits from all this a little bit more in an episode later on this week. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.